I found my business partner in my wife's arms. Not a stranger. Not some guy from the gym. Marcus, the man who had stood beside me at my wedding, who held my daughter when she was 20 minutes old, who I had trusted with half of everything I'd built over 14 years. That image doesn't leave you. I've tried. It was a Tuesday in March, just after 2 in the afternoon. I had flown back from Dallas a day early because the client meeting wrapped faster than expected. Good news, I thought. I'll surprise my wife. Maybe take the kids to dinner. I remember being in a good mood on the drive home from the airport, windows down, radio on, thinking about how lucky I was. The house was quiet when I pulled in. My wife's car was there. Marcus's truck was parked around the side of the house, half hidden behind the oak tree. I didn't think much of it at first. He came over often. We were partners. We had the kind of friendship where nobody called ahead. I walked in through the garage. I set my bag down in the kitchen, and then I heard her laugh. The specific laugh she only made when she thought no one could hear her. I hadn't heard that laugh in years. I followed it upstairs. I won't describe what I saw. You already know. What I will tell you is that for about 10 seconds I stood completely still in that doorway, and neither of them noticed me. I watched my wife reach up and touch my best friend's face like he was the most important thing in the world to her. Like she'd been waiting her whole life to touch him exactly like that. I closed the door quietly. I walked back downstairs. I sat at the kitchen table, and I stared at the wall for a long time. My name is Daniel. I was 43 years old. I owned half of a structural engineering firm in Austin, Texas that Marcus and I had built from a shared desk in a 2-room office. I had a daughter named Claire who was 9, and a son named Owen who was 6. I had a mortgage, a dog, a retirement account, and a marriage that I had believed in completely. In the span of about 90 seconds, I understood that I had been living inside a story that wasn't true. I didn't confront them that day. I know that surprises people when I tell them. I know it sounds cold, or cowardly, or strategic. And honestly, it was all three at once. The truth is, I didn't trust myself to speak. Not then. Whatever came out of my mouth in that moment wasn't going to help me. It was only going to help them. Give them a chance to get ahead of the story, to coordinate, to lawyer up before I'd even had time to think. So I did something that changed everything. I got back in my car, I drove to a hotel downtown, and I called the divorce attorney before I called anyone else. Her name was Patricia, and the first thing she said to me after I laid out the situation was, "Don't move out of the house. Don't confront either party yet. And don't touch a single financial account until I tell you to." She said it calmly, like she'd said it 100 times before. She probably had. What I didn't know at that moment, what Patricia explained to me over the next 3 hours, was that in Texas the business was community property. 14 years of work, the client list, the contracts, the brand, the relationships, half of it, in the eyes of the state, belonged to my wife. Not because she'd built it, but because we were married when I did. I drove back home that night like nothing had happened. My wife was in the kitchen making pasta. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if Dallas had gone well. I told her it had. I played with the kids after dinner. I read Owen his book. I tucked Claire in and told her the same thing I told her every night, that she was the best thing I'd ever done. Then I lay next to my wife in the dark and stared at the ceiling until 4 in the morning. That went on for 11 days. Patricia moved fast. We began the process of getting an independent valuation of the firm done quietly. I had already started documenting. I'm an engineer by training. I document everything. And I began pulling together records, contracts, financial statements, anything that established the timeline of how the business had been built, who had built it, and what Marcus's actual contribution looked like versus mine over the years. What I found over those 11 days made the betrayal worse, not better. Marcus had been billing personal expenses through the firm for at least 2 years. Small things at first. Meals. A hotel stay I hadn't thought to question. A conference he'd supposedly attended in San Diego. But when I looked harder, I found larger things. Vendor invoices that didn't match any project. A consulting payment to a company I'd never heard of that, when I traced it through 3 shell entities, led back to an LLC with Marcus's home address. He had been stealing from me. From us. While sleeping with my wife. I sat with that knowledge for 4 days before I told Patricia. She told me to gather everything I could and say nothing. I did exactly that. On day 12, I filed for divorce. My wife was blindsided. Looking back, I think she had told herself that I didn't know, that she had been careful enough, that she had been careful enough, that she had more time. She called me from the living room while I was in my car outside. I'd been waiting for the notification that the filing had gone through, and her voice had a particular quality to it. Not guilt. Panic. "What is this?" she said. "It's a divorce filing," I said. "Daniel, I need you to go through your attorney from here on. Patricia's information is in the paperwork." I hung up. What followed was not what I expected, even though Patricia had warned me. My wife was even told me for 8 hours. A firm in Austin with a reputation for aggressive tactics and high-asset cases. Within 2 weeks, I was being accused of financial misconduct. Her attorney claimed I had been hiding assets and manipulating business records in anticipation of the divorce. The valuation I had commissioned was characterized as self-serving. There were motions, counter-motions, demands for discovery. And then, on a Thursday afternoon 6 weeks after I filed, my wife's attorney introduced a new argument. That my behavior since the filing, specifically, the fact that I had taken the children to stay with my parents in San Antonio for 2 weekends while the proceedings began, constituted an attempt to disrupt the children's established living environment. She was going for primary custody. I want to be honest about what that did to me. Everything else I had managed to hold together with a kind of cold professionalism. The documentation, the strategy, the measured conversations through attorneys. But hearing that she was going to use the children as leverage made something in me come undone very quietly. Not with anger, with grief. Because I realized she knew exactly what it would cost me emotionally, and she had chosen to use it anyway. I called Patricia that evening. She talked me down off the ledge in about 20 minutes, and then told me something I've thought about many times since. She said, "She's not doing this because she wants the children. She's doing this because she wants you to make a mistake." I didn't make a mistake. Instead, I gave Patricia everything I had found about Marcus and the financial irregularities. She brought in a forensic accountant, a quiet, extremely precise woman named Dr. Rainey Torres, and over the following 3 weeks, Dr. Torres documented $214,000 in misappropriated funds traced directly to Marcus, spanning 26 months. Patricia filed a civil suit against Marcus on my behalf. The moment that suit was filed, everything changed. Because Marcus, facing a civil fraud action, immediately hired a defense attorney, and that attorney, in trying to build Marcus's defense, argued that some of the financial decisions in question had been made with my wife's knowledge, implying she had been involved in, or at least aware of, the irregularities. They were trying to spread the liability. What they actually did was hand Patricia a signed affidavit connecting my wife to financial decisions made during our marriage that she had explicitly told the divorce court she had no involvement in. That is what is commonly referred to as perjury. My wife's attorney called Patricia the morning after that affidavit surfaced and asked whether there was any interest in discussing settlement. Patricia told them we were interested in discussing settlement that was fair to my children. The custody argument was dropped within a week. My wife agreed to joint legal custody, primary physical custody to me, with generous visitation. She had made the calculation that fighting it further would only invite more scrutiny into what she did or didn't know about Marcus's fraud. She was probably right. The business was harder. Texas is a community property state, and there is no simple way around that. What we were able to argue, and what the forensic accounting helped establish, was that a significant portion of the firm's current value was attributable to client relationships and contracts that I had personally developed, and that Marcus's contribution over the last several years had been negative, not neutral, given the misappropriation. The firm's value was adjusted accordingly in the settlement. My wife received a buyout. It was less than she had expected when this started. Considerably less. The civil case against Marcus was settled out of court 18 months later. He paid back a large portion of what had been taken. He is no longer in the engineering business in Texas. I bought out his share at a valuation that reflected what the firm was actually worth after his conduct was factored in. I want to tell you about the day Claire figured out what had happened, or the version of it she could understand at 9 years old. We were driving to her soccer practice, and she asked me, out of nowhere, why Daddy and Mommy didn't live together anymore. I'd answered that question before, the standard answer, the gentle answer, but this time she said, "Did someone do something wrong?" I thought about that for a long time before I answered. Kids know more than we let ourselves believe. She wasn't asking because she was confused. She was asking because she had already decided the answer was yes, and she wanted to see if I would tell her the truth. I said, "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt people they're supposed to love, And when that happens, the people who got hurt have to decide what to do next. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "And you decided to be okay." I told her that was exactly right. That conversation meant more to me than winning anything in court. Owen took longer. He was 6 when this started, and 6-year-olds process differently. They act out, they regress, they get angry at the person they feel safest with, which was me. We did family counseling for 8 months. They were hard evenings. Homework meltdowns that were never really about homework. Nights when he cried and couldn't tell me why. We got through them. We are still getting through them, but he is a good kid with a big heart. And the counselor told me early on that children who have one stable parent almost always find their footing. I held on to that. The house sold 8 months after the divorce was finalized. My wife had moved out by then, and I'd been renting a place near the kids' school. The proceeds were divided per the settlement. I watched the new owners pull into the driveway on the day they took possession, and I felt something I didn't expect to feel. Relief. That house had held a version of my life that wasn't real. I didn't miss it. I bought a place in a neighborhood I had always liked. Older houses, big trees, a street where people still sit on their porches. The kids have their own rooms. There's a yard. The dog finally stopped looking confused. The firm's doing well. Better than well. I brought in a new partner, someone I had known professionally for years. Someone whose financial history I had my accountant review before I ever had the conversation. She is excellent at what she does, and she is honest. The combination is everything. I hear about Marcus occasionally through people we used to know. I don't go looking. What he does with his life is genuinely not my concern anymore. The resentment I thought I would carry turned out to have a shorter half-life than I expected. I think that's because I stopped letting him occupy space in my head. He made his choices. I made mine. The outcomes speak for themselves. My wife and I communicate about the children and nothing else. We are civil. We will be civil at graduations and weddings and whatever else the kids' lives require us to both be present for. I have made my peace with that. What I will not do is pretend that the version of our marriage I believed in was real. Because I spent 14 years building something I thought was solid, and I deserve to look clearly at what it actually was. Here is what I know now that I didn't know when I was standing in that doorway on a Tuesday in March. Too stunned to speak. The worst thing that has ever happened to you contains information you cannot get any other way. I know who I am now, in a way I didn't before. I know how I make decisions under pressure. I know what I'm willing to fight for and what I'm willing to let go. I know that my children are resilient in ways that have nothing to do with me and everything to do with who they already were. I know that trust is not something you give someone because you've known them a long time. I know that the people who tell you to slow down and think before you speak are almost always right. I know that silence, used correctly, is not the absence of power. It is the whole thing. Claire is 12 now. She plays soccer and she reads constantly, and she has her mother's eyes, and, I'm told, my stubbornness. Owen is 9. He wants to be an astronaut this week. Last month he wanted to design bridges. I told him those weren't mutually exclusive. He thought about it and agreed. Last Sunday we went to the farmer's market down the street, the 3 of us. Owen ate half a bag of kettle corn before we'd made it past the second stall. Claire found a booth selling handmade bookmarks and spent 20 minutes deciding. I stood there in the sun watching my kids argue pleasantly about which bookmark was better. And I thought about the man I was 3 years ago. The one who got off a plane in a good mood and drove home with the windows down, thinking he was lucky. He was right, actually. He was just lucky about the wrong things. I'm luckier now. About the right ones. If you are sitting somewhere reading this or listening to it because something in your life has just collapsed under you, because you walked into a room you weren't supposed to walk into, or found a message you weren't supposed to find, or finally admitted to yourself something you'd been refusing to look at, I want to tell you something that nobody told me. You are going to be angry for a while. That's correct. The anger means you know what you deserved. Don't skip it and don't live in it. Use it to do the things that need to be done. Get a good attorney before you say anything to anyone. Document everything. Don't move out and don't give up proximity to your children for any reason. Let the process work. Don't make decisions from the worst moment of your pain, and don't let anyone rush you into a position that costs you what matters most. And when your 9-year-old daughter looks at you from the passenger seat and tells you that you decided to be okay, let that be enough. Let that be the whole thing. Because it is.